The hardest part isn't the collapse itself, it is navigating what follows. You've experienced what many call an ego death. Perhaps it arrived through spiritual awakening, emerged during crisis, surfaced after heartbreak, manifested during a psychedelic journey, or culminated from years of inner turmoil, finally breaking through. Regardless of how it happened, you felt it deeply. The identity you held onto so tightly, your former self, simply dissolved. It vanished. Initially, there was peace, perhaps even liberation. But now, you're suspended in silence. No ambitions, no momentum, no defined self-worth fighting for. Just this vacant space where your identity once resided. This is where most people lose their way. We imagine enlightenment as perpetual cosmic euphoria. Reality proves messier, more disorienting. It leaves you sprawling across the floor of your existence, questioning why anything holds meaning anymore. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who revolutionized our understanding of the human mind, grasped this phase better than most. He termed it the death of the persona. When society's mask crumbles away, revealing how much of our existence was dictated by fear, conditioning, ego, and the desperate need for approval. Yet Jung also recognized this breakdown wasn't an ending. It marked a beginning, the birth of something far more authentic than the persona could ever be. But how do you transition from that hollow, post-ego, death emptiness into purposeful, meaningful action? How do you reconstruct yourself without reverting to pretense? That is what we're exploring here. This isn't about transforming into a productivity automaton. It concerns something far deeper. How to access soul-level drive, the kind untethered to external validation or identity. But rooted in truth, Carl Jung left us profound guidance. Stay with me through this exploration, because we're reshaping how you conceptualize motivation, purpose, and healing after ego death. By the end, you'll possess a new framework for moving forward, not backward to your old self, but toward the version of you that was concealed beneath all along. Here is where most people find themselves after ego death, suspended in the void. Not quite depression, not exactly apathy, more like nothing resonates. The pursuits you once chased, success, recognition, becoming someone, feel hollow now. Goals seem meaningless. Affirmations ring false, vision boards collect dust. You're not lacking motivation, you're lacking a self to motivate. Jung said this is the critical juncture where we either retreat into an old identity, numb ourselves, reattach to superficial goals, or we begin what he called individuation. That is the gradual, sometimes agonizing path of integrating the unconscious, discovering the self with a capital S, and creating a life not from ego, but in alignment with soul. He wrote that within each of us exists another whom we do not know. This other speaks through dreams, showing us how differently it perceives us from how we perceive ourselves. This becomes your new compass, not through force, but through listening. This stage feels incredibly confusing. You're not lazy, you're recalibrating, you're becoming aware of how much of your life was constructed on survival, not sovereignty. So if you're occupying that space right now, where nothing feels urgent and old ambitions don't ignite you, don't panic. You're not lost, you're transitioning. Jung didn't believe the unconscious would abandon you. He believed it would transmit messages through symbols, dreams, synchronicities, quiet impulses, guiding you toward your next chapter. But you must remain receptive. The new self cannot be forced, but it will emerge. Before we continue, if you're someone who loves expanding consciousness and exploring life's deeper dimensions, make sure to subscribe to Fractal Wisdom to never miss moments of clarity, insight, and soul. Align truth. You've reached the void. Post. Ego death, floating in that peculiar space where old motivations fail and new ones haven't materialized yet. Let's be real. This part is strangely exhausting. You're not doing much, yet you feel depleted. You want to move, create, build something meaningful, but your body and mind refuse to synchronize. Everything feels sluggish, heavy. Here is the paradox. What if the thing trapping you in that stuck place isn't the emotion itself, but your resistance to it? I know it sounds counterintuitive, but every time you feel exhausted and criticize yourself for it, you're not resting, you're struggling. You're burning mental energy trying to exist in a different state than your current one. And that resistance, that internal argument, is what drains you. Not the tiredness itself, but the battle against the tiredness. Carl Jung understood this dynamic profoundly. He said what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. This wasn't merely metaphorical. He was describing the human shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, judge, and avoid. When we resist what is inside us, we fragment ourselves. We create internal warfare. We leak energy pretending we're fine. But what happens when you stop? What happens when you let yourself be tired completely? Just surrender to it. What happens when instead of shaming your lack of drive, you sit with it, breathe with it, and listen to it? You begin to feel what lies beneath. And when you stop resisting the so-called negative state, when you allow it to exist without judgment, you create space for it to move. That is when transformation begins. Let's ground this in a real life moment. You're lying in bed. Nothing sounds appealing. Your inner critic activates. You're wasting time. You should get up and accomplish something. Why are you like this? But what if instead of spiraling into shame, you said, I'm feeling unmotivated right now. That is acceptable. I'm going to feel it and not try to escape it. What you'll discover is that your body relaxes. The tension in your chest loosens, your mind softens, and maybe, not always immediately, an hour later, or even 10 minutes later, something stirs, a small spark, a curious thought, a gentle urge to move or create or take a walk. That is not forced motivation. That is because the deeper truth is emotions aren't good or bad. From a higher state of consciousness, they're simply energy waiting to move, to be expressed, to complete their cycle. Sadness isn't weakness. It is the body processing grief, loss, or a need for release. Anger isn't evil. It is often unspoken truth trying to protect your boundaries. And fear is your nervous system attempting to keep you safe, perhaps outdated, but still trying. Children understand this. Just observe them. When that's sad, they cry loudly. Then they're finished. When they're angry, they scream it out. And 5 minutes later, they're playing. That is because they don't have beliefs about their emotions. They don't judge them. They simply feel them until we teach them not to. We teach them that good boys don't cry. Anger is unacceptable. Calm down. Be strong. Don't be lazy. And gradually they begin to suppress. That suppression creates a shadow, the unconscious part of our psyche that Jung devoted his life to studying. It is filled with every emotion, impulse, truth, and desire we've ever judged or disowned. And your real power lives in that shadow. Your creativity, passion, boldness, authenticity. All of it is buried beneath layers of shoulds and shouldn'ts. So if you're feeling unmotivated, tired, moody, uninspired, that is actually good. That is your fuel. You don't need to fix it. You need to feel it. And when you do, it transforms. And here is something surprisingly powerful. Just playing with the paradox can ignite creativity. Let yourself explore the idea. What if my laziness was my muse? What if you wrote a poem called Fueled by Laziness, or an essay titled The Productive Power of Doing Nothing? What if your sadness became the water that softens stone? What if your fear inspired a story called The Brave Coward? Just imagine how artistically rich that sounds. Your mind loves a twist. It loves contradiction. It loves when something doesn't quite fit, because that is where tension lives. And from that tension, new meaning can be born. Once you flip the label, your imagination lights up. It stops trying to escape the emotion and starts dancing with it. This is creativity at its core, not the polished social media version, but the raw, authentic kind that comes straight from the soul. Jung would say, this is your unconscious coming online, offering symbols, language, and metaphor to help you express what the rational mind cannot. So next time you feel off, don't fight it. Write, paint, or speak from it. Let the paradox be the punchline. Your resistance isn't your enemy. It is your untapped artist, and your shadow is holding the paintbrush. By now, you've probably realized something most people never grasp. The path forward after ego death isn't about pushing harder. It is about listening deeper. And that brings us to one of Carl Jung's most powerful, yet most misunderstood concepts, the self. Not your job title, not your social media bio, not even your personality type. Jung's self, with a capital S, is the totality of who you are. It is your soul's blueprint. It includes your conscious mind and your shadow, your wounds, and your potential. It is not just who you are today, it is who you were always meant to become. The self wants to guide you. It wants to grow, evolve, express, and create through you. It sends messages constantly, dreams that feel like clues, strange synchronicities, random urges to write or move or call someone, feelings that don't make logical sense but somehow feel true. But we miss it because we're trained to only trust logic, only trust action, only trust results. Meanwhile, motivation from the self doesn't come from pressure. It comes from resonance, from notice, even if it is quiet, from following the gentle pull, not the loud demand. And look, there is a reason this is so difficult. There is a reason most people avoid their shadow. It is not because they're weak. It is because feeling, really feeling, can feel like losing control. And losing control feels like losing your ground. You know, you have to go to work tomorrow, run your business, show up for your kids and your partner, keep functioning. So of course you tighten up, you suppress, you armor yourself with logic and routines and a forced smile, because you're afraid that if you let go, even for a moment, your whole familiar life will collapse. That is not failure, that is survival. And it is completely valid. But here is the deeper truth. Feeling your sadness, your tiredness, your anger, it doesn't destroy your life. It grounds you in it. Because beneath all that tension is your real self waiting to be heard. Let's make this concrete. You've been sitting in the void, letting yourself feel without resisting. And one afternoon, this strange urge emerges. You suddenly want to rearrange your room, or go for a walk, or open a document, and type out a few sentences that don't even make sense yet. You almost dismiss it. You think, that is silly. What is the point? But it feels light, expansive. That is the self speaking. Follow it. Jung believed this kind of symbolic non-linear intelligence is where the gold lives. He called it the transcendent function, the bridge between the conscious and unconscious. When you allow both voices to speak, something new emerges, a direction that isn't forced but revealed. But yes, it is hard to trust that, especially in a culture that treats rest like weakness, intuition like nonsense, and productivity as the ultimate sign of worth. You were raised in that system. So of course you doubt yourself. Of course you feel like doing nothing is dangerous, like you'll fall behind, like if you don't figure it all out right now, you'll stay stuck forever. But the truth is, the soul doesn't run on deadlines. It runs on alignment. And when you start honoring your energy, listening to your deeper impulses, making space for feeling instead of constantly fixing, something shifts slowly. Then suddenly you start wanting to move again, not because you should, but because it feels meaningful. You start writing not to be productive, but to express something real. You reconnect not to perform, but to relate authentically. And this is when the magic begins. Motivation stops being something you choose. You become a vessel for the self, for life itself, for that inner artist, inventor, content creator, healer, teacher, builder, whatever it is that has been hiding under the rubble of who you thought you had to be. Ask yourself, what has myself been trying to say lately? And if you don't know the answer, good. That means you're listening. And now you might be wondering, okay, but what do I actually do with all of this? Because life is still happening, bills still exist. The world doesn't pause just because you've gone through a spiritual death and started waking up to your truth. And this is where we bring it full circle, because here is the truth that most spiritual bypassing skips over. You still have an ego, and that is okay. Carl Jung never said the ego was the enemy. In fact, he believed the goal wasn't to kill the ego, it was to integrate it, to bring it into alignment with the self. Your ego is your interface. It is how you operate in the world. It helps you make decisions, set boundaries, protect yourself when needed. It only becomes problematic when it starts pretending it is all there is, when it disconnects from the deeper source. So the path isn't about choosing between soul and structure. It is about letting your structure serve your soul. And this is where motivation takes on a whole new dimension. You're not moving just to achieve. You're not building out of fear of falling behind. You're creating because you have something to say, something to give, something that has been living inside you, waiting for space. So yes, start small. Let your routines be soulful. Let your work have rhythm. Let your creativity have cycles. Take care of your body because you love it, not because it is a productivity machine. Let your calendar have grace. Let your mornings be soft. Let your evenings be sacred. And when resistance shows up again, as it will, don't fight it. Ask gently, what are you trying to tell me? Because now you know how to hear the answer. You've met the part of you that doesn't need to hustle to matter. You've begun to understand how sadness, laziness, even fear are obstacles. They're messengers. They carry the keys to your next poem, your next idea, your next direction. This is the gift of ego death. It strips away everything false so that what is true can finally speak. And when you let that truth shape your actions, when you let your shadow, your stillness, your paradoxes inform how you move, how you show up, how you serve, you become whole. You stop pushing and start aligning. You stop chasing life and start living it fully, wildly, softly, in all its beautiful contradiction. That is not just motivation. That is embodiment. That is the self alive in the world. And if you've made it this far, you might already feel it. That quiet knowing, that shift. It is not loud, not flashy, and not viral, but it is real. And that is enough. If this resonated with you, if you felt even a subtle shift while watching, hit that subscribe button and join a space for deep thinkers, soul seekers, and those who are done pretending.